Hey, welcome to the Edge Television broadcast, Matt.
Thanks for having me. Let me just fix this really quick.
Alrighty.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Matt. Hey, man, good to have you on the program tonight. We're going to be talking about the illusion of us, the suppression and evolution of human consciousness. Matt, before we get going, tell our audience a little bit about you. How'd you get started in writing a book like that, and what's it all about?
All right. Well, thanks. I was someone who started writing in college because I started to uncover some certain things about history and things about the truth that that didn't really jive with what we're being told in the mainstream, and a lot of things that were kind of being given in our curriculum in schools and various things like that. And so I had no intention of being a writer who was trying to uncover, some people would call them conspiracies or ancient history or the truth. It kind of just happened where I kind of stumbled upon it. And I started writing because I had some kind of really interesting experiences in college with, extreme hiking adventures and animals that were trying to charge down on me. Various kind of interesting encounters that occurred that caused me to write. And then subsequently, I then started researching and finding out truth, and that led me to then write about the whole nother side of it. I was writing like articles about hiking in nature, and then I moved into all of a sudden writing about consciousness and quantum mechanics and just all these things that are so far out there that most people don't really understand. And it kind of took me down that rabbit hole of really delving into the mysteries of who we really are and what our history has really been.
Well, I tell you what, I think most people should recognize now that we have been lied to, and that many of the things that we even think have really sort of been programmed into us. I say there's a cabal of dried up old crackers of a European descent, most probably. But you could also label them Illuminati or something else. But there does seem to be a sort of a programming to the general populace. And I hate to be part of that mass populace that is just going along and I like to buck the system. If I see your sacred cow, I'm going to kick its gonads right up its rear. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to take it. But how did you? What was the first thing, Matt, that you started to see? Wait a minute, man. This doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. What was it? A topic, a subject? What was it?
Okay, so the title of the book is "The Illusion of Us: The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness." Because when I started researching consciousness and what it really was, and kind of these things that I wasn't really reading about in other places, the more I looked, with things like medicine, with things like what our curriculum is, what the media is showing, all of these things, I started to realize that there was a massive suppression of not only the truth of history, mm-hmm. but more importantly, the truth of what consciousness really is and who we really are. Mm. And it's a very powerful experience for me, because as silly as that sounds to a lot of people, and a lot of people would just kind of laugh when you start talking about some kind of a conspiracy of the truth and a holding back of the truth. But when you start to look at the evidence of what's actually out there and what the truth really is, you see that at every level, it seems like it's been held back. Because of the fact that what I discovered was, through so many other brave researchers as well, is the truth has become so big, so many lies kind of piled on top of each other. It's like when someone in their life and they're kind of a liar in their life, and they just keep lying everywhere they go, and eventually catches up with them, right? Mm-hmm. It becomes bigger and bigger, and they can't really manage it. That's kind of what's happened with the truth of history. It's become so big and so different than what we're being told that it hasn't been revealed to us, because it would disrupt society so much. Mm. It would disrupt a lot of things. Mm-hmm.
Well, Matt, isn't the excuse they use sort of for disclosure of the existence of aliens? They say that if the population had that information, it would break down, and particularly the religious institutions, which now most people don't have any use for. A lot of say the alternative media doesn't have use for, say, organized religions. But the fact of the matter is, organized religions in and of itself there is sort of a glue there. for society, like it or not, and whatever the teaching is, there is some sort of glue. The people in general, they seem like they go to church, they pay their taxes, they obey the rules. They're way more rule obedient than say alternative media people would say. They look for rules to break, and I would count myself among them. But once that core is dissipated or undone in its mooring, then
right.
wouldn't that be the start of chaos on a larger scale?
Well, that's part of the control system, I like to call it, coming down. We've had, and again, a lot of people would kind of roll their eyes when you start mentioning this, but really, when you start looking at what we're going to kind of go over tonight, you can't help but not want to look into yourself. And I really encourage anybody. We've been lied to by so many so-called experts for so long that anytime someone tells you something, including me or including Daniel, you should be looking it up yourself to verify it, because the truth has kind of become so murky and so foggy. And like you said, religion is one of these aspects where long ago, and as you can look in the evidence, it used to be based on very good intentions and kind of the freedom of the spirit and understanding where we are in the universe. And it became hijacked and turned into a control system. And so you mentioned how we're seeing less and less people that are quite as religious as they used to be, and how that's kind of leading to a lot more people starting to question the truth. And that's right. That's a really good point, is that the disclosure of the truth is happening in a way where it's slowly occurring every single year, a little bit faster than it was before. We're seeing this acceleration of it, and religion is seeing more and more people flock away from it and moving towards kind of not being an atheist, but being someone who's just spiritual or whatever it is. And that's worrying a lot of them. And like you said, if the truth of disclosure, and you just mentioned extraterrestrials, well, the reason why extraterrestrials aren't told to us is because it's part of this giant lie. It's all connected, where if one of the elements came out like that, it would kind of cause a domino effect of all the rest of them to follow. So they have to hold the whole thing back, because that's the only way they would be able to maintain the status quo of what we have. And what do we have? Well, we have a world where people we're this incredibly intelligent being who is spending the majority of our life working the entire time. Nobody ever has any time to ever have to go look into truth themselves. Nobody has any time to, and that's the idea, is time is basically gone. Time has been stolen from everybody, to the fact where most people would never even begin to have enough time to look into the truth of what we're saying, because their life is just so jam-packed with so many things that are causing them to either have to work more because they have to pay off certain items or whatever it is. And so the truth has been very cleverly hidden among generations of people who no longer look for it. They live in a world of ignorance, where they simply get their truth from K through high school, sometimes college, and then they go and they watch the media, and they think that they have the gist of how everything in reality works. They think they understand the vastness of the cosmos around us, and that's a very good way that we've been controlled. If you think to yourself, well, how do you get someone to see the truth? You have to go through certain very specific steps for them to do it. It's part of kind of awakening someone's awareness potential. And the way to do that is kind of start right now where we are on this planet. In most of our TV shows and most of our media, reality shows and those things that are portraying kind of the glorification of us spending lots of money and going to tons of parties and all these things that are almost like a fake illusion of reality. That's why I call the book The Illusion of Us, because we've been kind of programmed to this with all these various different things to kind of no longer realize, even with all the technology and all these advancements we have possible with, telescopes that can view, hundreds of light years into the distant cosmos. We've all kind of decided to ignore that. We've all decided to kind of forget that exists. Someone watches something on Discovery Channel, and that was cool, that was fun. But then they don't think about it ever again, and they go back to what they were doing before, which is like, I'm going to go from point A to point B, and I'm never even going to look out at the night sky. I'm never going to look at the stars anymore. I'm never even going to go outside and do anything except just go from one building to another. And that's such a strange idea for a species.
Yeah. Well, Matt, you said a few minutes ago that even if I were to say something, I might not be telling the truth. But I got to tell you, I had a worldwide expert on reverse speech on a few weeks ago, and he said the old cowboy tells the truth backwards and forwards. So, hey, but anyway, tonight we're talking about the illusion, or maybe somebody could say the matrix. We all are sort of in a matrix. Why do we believe what we believe? And what is that program mechanism that is used against us? Because if we understand the programming language that they have, then maybe we will be able to break ourselves free and live in the world that we choose, a construct of our design. Let's get to a few questions we got coming in. This is from Nature Boy. You mentioned earlier, as in your opening, you said at some point you got a revelation by animals charging at you. But Nature Boy says, what wildlife stories is that from? And did you see Bigfoot out there?
Not yet. It was interesting you mentioned Bigfoot, because I was actually going to talk about giants and the Nephilim later on, but no, nothing like that yet. But I've had encounters with bears and moose and various things like that were pretty frightening. Kind of somebody who just kind of goes off into the middle of the wilds type of thing. And so that, as scary as those encounters were at the time, they did lead me to write. So I have to be pretty thankful that they happened.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Let's get to another question here. What is the illusion of us? Are we trapped consciousness or living on a holodeck?
So reality is real. The world is not a flat plane, and it's not all being projected, and all the stars aren't fake. It is real, but it's only real to the perception that we have available to us. So we're not able to perceive beyond, essentially, most people aren't able to really proceed beyond this third dimensional plane that we've been kind of trapped in. It's actually called Ka by the Egyptians, and it's the third dimensional plane that we think is the great feat of this reality to conquer. Climbing the highest peak or whatever it is. When in reality, even our consciousness itself doesn't even reside in the third dimension. So really, the great adventure of this reality is within, and trying to go within and figure out consciousness. Because when you do, you go far beyond the third dimension. You actually become free. Because what we have to understand is that the third dimension of thinking that consciousness isn't real, and it's just a smart brain, right? Just a smart brain thinking here in this third dimensional reality. That's how we're kept in a box. If that thinking is why people are so violent all over the world to each other, because they've no concept of realizing that, we're really not. Mm-hmm. We're not all just like pitted against one another. This is a planet that's being surrounded by, billions of other galaxies and other planets that harbor life, and yet we're kind of worrying about little bits of soil here and there. It's kind of funny if you really zoom out and think about it with that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Matt, if you were to describe in our conversation, what are we talking about?
What do you mean? What are we talking about?
What are we discussing right now?
We're discussing the idea that truth hasn't been really given to us in the way we've been told, and not only that, but our perceptions of what we think reality should be has actually been kind of manufactured for us. Okay.
All right. I always hear, I don't listen to the program, but I've heard Rush Limbaugh say that liberalism is a mental disease. Baby Wolf from the UK, watching the program tonight, wants to know, is religion a mental disease?
Anything that causes a person's mind to not be open to everything that's out there, that throws them into a very small mindset, and maybe even pits them against one another, is a control system. Anything that doesn't reveal the truth. I mean, let's take most of these control systems through the religions that have really been hijacked. There are still some that have remained more true, like Hinduism and Buddhism. These areas that still work, that still focus more on the spirit. But if we look at the control of these hijacked religions that are centered kind of out of the Vatican, that has become very much a control system to hold the world in this illusion, because people in those systems almost never question anything. Because one, it used to be used to be penalized by death if you did, but now it's more so like you be scrutinized by society. It's become a system where the way they perpetuate and control it is by creating like an army of people that are all part of the same mindset, and that if anybody was to try to break out from that, they would almost be cast out of society. I mean, if someone was to walk down the street with some of the things that we're talking about right now in a like a rural town somewhere, and people all, let's say everybody sat down in that town and watched that show. You know, people aren't, let's say some of these people aren't super educated. They would see that person as completely crazy, a psychopath, and they'd probably walk the other way, right?
Probably.
That's how our society has gone, is that these people who have tried to reveal the truth are considered crazy, and then society kind of just laughs, and then they don't really consider it.
What if, say, a particular religion had a truth, an inevitable truth, indisputable truth? Let's just say a non-religious person was on the pursuit of truth from whatever source. If truth is truth, would they come eventually to the truth that would be described by the religious person? Do you understand the question?
The only way, yeah, I was just trying to think of how I was going to answer that. The only way that I think someone could really come to the truth is, unfortunately, if they kind of start over.
Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't say all truth, by the way. I said a truth.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, can truth be different for different people? Or
no,
is there truth?
Truth is constant. That's one of the things that I've uncovered, is that there is a consistent truth out there. The problem is it's been so muddied over time that we've been made to believe that there isn't a truth. If society, what a dangerous thing that is, right? What an idea. The idea that's been perpetuated in society that there is no truth and everyone has their own truth. Therefore, there'd be no one to ever actually figure out what it really is. Mm-hmm. And I see that all the time. That's been a very clever way to hide this. But when you are staring at evidence, when you're staring at cuneiform tablets that are talking about the most ancient, advanced civilizations we have, when you're and they're all correlating in these different cultures all across the earth, you know you're talking about truth because you're basing it on facts. We have to all be kind of our own version of Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes basically said that he was always going to be the one that discovers truth through uncovering using evidence. No matter what your opinion is based on something, you always must have something that's based on, are you using evidence to look at? Are you looking at it objectively? Or is there some reason why you're emotionally connected to a certain predetermined outcome, and that's why you're not able to ever come to the truth? You said, is there some truth in religion? Of course. There's all kinds of truth hidden among things, but the problem is there's so much misinformation that it's been all jostled around that people don't really know where to look anymore.
A famous writer once said, ever learning and never coming to the knowledge of truth. At what point would one know that they need to stop learning and come to the truth? How would they know that they don't have it?
Well, what I mean, there is so much left to learn. I've just scratched the surface of the full truth of everything. But what I mean is when you can uncover pieces of the full story to understand that are truth. And when you can get those pieces, you can start to fit them together to try to like understand what's really happening. Mm-hmm. And when you do, it'll blow your mind to connect this piece with this piece, and then look at what's happening in the world.
Well, the writer of that sentence that I just read, ever learning and never coming to the knowledge of truth, basically is saying at some point they expect you or us to come to the truth, to the knowledge of the truth.
Eventually,
is that
if someone is objective,
or do we have to go to another dimension, or can we learn the truth in this life?
Oh, absolutely. It's never too late for somebody. I have a grandmother who just turned 90 years old, and you wouldn't believe how conscious she is. And we have discussions about the most advanced stuff I talk about, and she's right there with me talking about it. It's never too late. Mm-hmm. Never too late to find the truth, no matter how old you are, as long as you have an open mind.
Of all the religious writings I've ever read, I've only read one where a religious figure claims to be the truth. Jesus claimed, he said, I am the truth with a capital T. In your research, have you come across any other statesman, philosopher, writer that makes that claim as well?
Actually, yes, because one of the things that's very interesting in learning about what has happened in history and learning about how there's been these two sides, where one side has seemingly kind of wanted humanity to be more enlightened and learn the truths of things, and there's been another side who has really not wanted us to gain our consciousness, and that side has always been at odds, and at certain times one has more power than another, and that causes us to go through these periods where we lose tremendous amounts of truth and knowledge, and we get into huge areas where we literally lose it all. And right now we're at a point where we're starting to regain all of that based on these lost writings. You mentioned Jesus, and when you start learning about these lost writings, like the Book of Enoch in the Nag Hammadi library, these are writings that predate religion, and they actually talk about the same concepts that we find today in the modern Bible, but there's been so much that's been taken out, and so much that's been rewritten to what it originally said. And in those writings, Enoch, you find possibly was an incarnation of the same being that was Jesus. And you start learning more, and you start looking into, well, could these gods of history actually been using these great beings as incarnations to allow something very specific that needed to happen at a certain time? If you needed someone to provide certain information to the people or have inventions at certain times, you would probably want to make sure it happened. And so beings like, you see these great beings like Gandhi and Jesus, Muhammad, all these beings that seem to have reached the most heightened state of humanity that they can possibly reach. This state where they're considered gods by the people around them, where they can manifest things and have all these things occur. And when you see that it's the same thing that has been considered all throughout history. And it's been called magic, and that's why things witches and all these things of looking into people with magic have been hunted down. Because there's been this lost knowledge from this ancient time when, like Jesus, right, when magic existed, where they could manifest things and cause things to change. That existed in the past, and it's actually been wiped out and completely lost to us. And there were these beings that did speak truth, but it's been quite a long time since that happened.
Okay. And for those of you just joining the broadcast, we have on our Newsmaker line tonight, Matt LaCroix. We're talking about illusions, truth, and consciousness. If you have a question for Matt, you can click on the Fast Blast link on the left side of the website, or you can join him in the live chat now. Let's get back to the live chat questions. We'll go through a few of these questions. Matt Curious wants to know, Matt, are you a student of David Icke's writing, and do you believe that reptilians exist?
I've listened to a lot of David Icke throughout my years, and at one point I realized, unfortunately, that aspect of what he says, I think, is kind of been a small bit of a misleading thing. It's strange. As I come across the truth, and I try to look objectively at all these different people all over the world that are coming up with evidence here and there, I find that there's certain people who are very, very, very popular. Graham Hancock, David Icke, Michael Tellinger, all these certain people, they focus on one aspect only, and they never really cover these other things that are very important. Like, you'll never really hear David Icke talking about the Anunnaki or talking about these other things, but he talks about reptilians the whole time. Why? And then, but then on the other side, people like Graham Hancock focus completely on the ancient civilization side, but they never mention anything else about, like, who the gods were. And I started to wonder about that. Like, why these guys are so smart, right? They are so smart. It's not like them to not uncover this stuff too.
Matt, of the ancient gods, how many of those are still alive?
Well, that's one of the things that we kind of misperceptions, and one of the reasons why they're called gods is that they can essentially live for thousands of years, if not sometimes longer. And we see in some of these ancient cuneiform writings some of the dates on some of these beings that have existed, like Atrahasis, who is known as Noah, and some of these beings who have lived 500 to 900 years, because there was a completely different type of human that used to exist back then, and we've been genetically downgraded so that our cells will break down at a maximum of 120 years. We have what are called telangers at the end of our cells that break down, and we haven't actually reached the technology yet to manipulate that correctly. That's why human beings seem to all die around, the healthiest human beings seem to all die around the same age, like around 110 or 120 at a max. But these beings didn't have that, and that's why they could these great pharaohs and these various different beings drinking monatomic gold and all these things, they could live for hundreds of years and they would outlive everyone around them, and that's why they were considered gods. And yes, some of them are still here.
Which one of those gods alive today that can come in our plane of in our dimension, touch our lives, and basically recreate a new life in us so that our eyes are open and we see the truth? Which one of those gods is doing that currently?
I would say that all throughout history, there's been this one very, very compassionate God who has who has kind of designated himself with the total enlightenment of humanity, and that God has gone through many, many names, and those names are Thoth, Hermes, Ningshita, Enoch. When you start looking at who that was in all these different writings across the world, you see extremely similar characteristics to all of them. So similar, in fact, and information that carries over, that you start to realize that it's just an incarnation of the same being, same God.
Have you been touched by said God?
It seems like when you're uncovering the truth and you really start kind of going down that road where it's not just a casual thing, but you say, aha, you put this piece together and then you put this piece together. When you're doing that, you feel this tremendous energy. You really feel completely different, like you've never felt before. And I do believe that right now humanity is being used as kind of chess match pawns for the gods to kind of go certain different directions. And when certain humans decide they want to follow what I like to call the hero's path, which is not dedicating their whole life, but at least dedicating some time in their life to uncovering the truth and then maybe becoming a teacher to try to spread it, they get assistance and kind of by these gods of history that have always been there.
All right. Mandy Thompson has this question for you, and I'm going to relate to it here in just a second. She says, are giants on our plane, and will we be able to see them with our own eyes? And just today, as a matter of fact, through my Facebook feed, somebody said, here's video from Afghanistan. I don't know if you've seen it. They claimed that our soldiers were fighting, and a gigantic red-headed giant was coming through this corn field. Did you see that video?
I haven't seen that video, but I have to say, when I was researching truth, giants were one of the hardest things for me to accept, because it just sounds silly. But the more I started looking into these stories of all these things that we consider myth now, the more I see that some of them actually were real, and some of them are symbolic metaphors, and then other things are actually really trying to say that. And so one of the best nuggets of truth that I've come across in researching is one of the most famous people we get taught about in school, Magellan, right? Magellan circumnavigated the world because Spain wanted to find a route to go all across the world because they were dominating the eagle through Spain was dominating all over the world. And so they sent Magellan to find this route to travel around the world. And of course, we have the problem of the Americas with the Panama Canals. They can't go across it.
I don't know how much research you've done in the conventional Bible, but it did say at some point that in the days of Noah, there were giants in the land. I think if you jump to the New Testament in there, it says, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man comes. And of course, that basically is saying that there's going to be giants reappear. Now, Steve Quayle is a big one on giants. There are people, and they say, I've had on a couple of people in this program that say that there's been some sort of skeletons or something been found in Antarctica, indicating that there are in fact giants.
Okay, so what happened is, long in our history, the reason why the pharaohs of Egypt and all of these very, very tall beings with elongated skulls have been mimicked and worshipped is that they were these lost giants, which simply meant they had this genetic DNA from the gods. Now, to get back to what we were saying, because it directly leads into it, is Magellan was searching for a route to circumnavigate the world. And this is something that people don't know, that because it's been very much kept out of the history books. But I encourage everybody to go look at this. And he had a scribe with him who was recording all the different things he was seeing on his journey. And we don't often believe truth unless it comes from someone who's actually respected. And that's why I'm telling you this. Mm-hmm. So Magellan is traveling around the world, and he's sailing south of Patagonia. And he lands to go in and get food and supplies. And they run across these massive giants. This is Magellan. And the scribe that's with him starts recording all of these accounts of these beings that were 10 feet tall or more. And, some of them were violent, and some of them they would fight with, and they ended up having to leave, and they sailed back to Spain, and they gave all these accounts of these giants. And the Queen of Spain actually sent subsequent trips back to this area and actually recovered some of these massive skeletons of these giants.
And it has been said that the Smithsonian Institute in early in American history was seizing the skeletons that they found in these earthen mounds right here in Indiana. There's something called the Anderson Mounds, and they just claimed that Indians just for no reason just piled dirt up and whatever. Yeah. But I totally don't believe that. But I'm thinking. There is something to this giants thing. Perhaps some have claimed that the Anunnaki are going to come down. They're going to be giants. I'll tell you what, Matt, if you had one of them big, long, elongated skulls, would you have elongated skull if you had if they said if you had your skull elongated, you could have supernatural powers? Would you agree to that?
I think the reason they were doing it was to try to mimic what the gods already had. So it was like they saw the gods with these enlarged craniums, and they're very tall beings, and so these gods, of course, had knowledge that was far beyond what they could ever even imagine, and so they thought, well, and once those gods disappeared, they would mimic them because they thought, like you said, that would make them more intelligent and be just like those gods. Mm-hmm. And so these you mentioned Noah and all these things. What we have to understand is there's this lost history of things that have occurred on this earth. And the reason why so much of it is gone is that there have been cataclysms that have wiped it out. And we're kind of picking up the pieces of, you mentioned the Smithsonian. The truth has been, again, so suppressed that when they were finding skeletons like that, they were actually taking them out. The U.S. Navy was actually taking, especially during World War II, in World War I, they were taking them out in the ocean and actually dumping them out in the Pacific Ocean so sharks could eat them. And so that nobody could ever find the truth. And because if nobody ever saw evidence, then they could keep perpetuating this lie of what we have in school of this curriculum, how we just simply evolved from apes and that's all it is. And hey, guess what? Now you just go about and do your thing and keep fighting each other and don't think about anything that has to do with higher consciousness.
In my world, if I ever want to shut up an evolutionist, I just say, what was the monkey before he was a monkey? I mean, because in the chart of evolution, man, they always start with the monkey. And, I ain't no relative of no damn ape. Okay, I'm a cowboy. First there's a cowboy, and then there's me. But I'm just saying, they always just show the monkey, then it kind of goes up to the caveman, Neanderthal, some hairy dudes. Then you come into the 20th century man, and then it's going back down the other way. You got these transvestites, and I think it's going back down. All right, let's get a lot more of these questions coming in for you, Matt LaCroix. Here's one from Dreamwalker. In what dimension does consciousness reside? And I'll tell you what, I want to answer that, but first of all, what is consciousness?
Okay, so one of the things that I really try to hammer in my book, one of the most important things in The Illusion of Us, is us being able to separate the true self of who we are. Who are we? Are we this body that you see in front of you, or are we something different? Are we something that's not contained within? Is it some kind of an antenna that receives our consciousness, right? Because if someone sits around all day and eats a bunch of junk food, they're going to feel so sluggish and slow, and they're almost going to have no connection to their consciousness. It's like their antenna is completely shut off, right? But if someone, eats a bunch of vegetables and then runs around outside and starts thinking about expansive things about consciousness, that whole entire transition of how that being is thinking is completely different. They all of a sudden have tuned into their true self. So that's why history has been so easily concealed, is that the most basic stepping block that we have to separate ourselves is that we are our consciousness. That's our spirit. That's who we are. And that this physical body is simply just this temporary mortality experience for us to go through this life here. And so you mentioned consciousness. Well, we are living in the third dimensional plane here in the world.
On a side note, do the Anunnaki have a grandma?
A grandma.
Yeah. Do they have grandmas? I was wanting to know. I figured I'd just ask you. I never asked anybody that question. I figured I'd just ask you.
There are the family hierarchy system exists everywhere like it does here. I mean, we're just talking about biological beings that need to reproduce
All right.
down through themselves. But so consciousness exists beyond the third dimension, exists beyond the fourth dimension. That's where consciousness resides, completely outside of Earth. And so if someone is kept in the physical only, then they're never going to strive for anything to even think about the vast
So do only organic beings have a consciousness? Do plants have consciousness?
Yes, they do. That was a very difficult thing for me to fully understand, is what kinds of consciousness exists out there. And, they're not, and clearly what I've come to understand is that there are many, many different kinds of consciousness. There are, they're not all the same kinds of consciousness. There's like you said, there's a plant consciousness. Mm-hmm. There's an animal consciousness, and all these kinds of things. They're different kinds of consciousness, and they can't really be measured against each other because that's not really how reality works. They're too different. There is an intelligence with plants. You can see it so clearly.
Okay. For instance, you have sunflowers. It is clear you can literally watch the sunflower turn its seeded head toward the sun. Now, I don't know if that's all organic. I just think the plant likes to bathe in the little nude sunbathe in there. What's going on there? Is it consciousness or is it organic?
Well, you're talking about several things happening at once. I mean, that plant is directly connected into this massive hierarchy system of the plants on the earth. So there's this earth system of nature. All the different plants that are growing out, they all have roots down into the same place. And so that those flowers on that sunny day, when that sun is just cresting over the trees, it's responding to wanting that energy. And it's not thinking like we are. It's on its own type of spirit energy.
Can a plant feel pain?
Not in the same ways that we think of it as. I mean, as a biological being with the type of components we have, it's not really fair to compare a thing like a plant. I do believe that plants, in their own way, can definitely feel like suffering and pain and all those things, but it's not at the same level we have.
Okay, I got to ask you, have you ever hugged a tree?
Oh, absolutely. People used to call me Nature Boy. I mean, hey, listen, people can make fun of that stuff all you want, but the fact is, one of the most important things I've learned with these philosophers and some of these people that have reached their highest state is that you will never reach a higher state of consciousness if you can't connect with nature at all.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got a chicken coop, and I was running water from my spigot about 100 yards over to the coop, and there's this tree right in the middle. So I was going to drill a wood board onto this tree high up, sort of suspended, so it's up in the air. But I'm telling you, Matt, when I was drilling in that tree, I felt kind of sad, man. I feel like I was just jabbing it in the side, and I thought, man, did my consciousness sort of relate to the tree, that I was drilling a hole in the tree, causing it pain?
Let me tell you, Daniel, it makes me happy to hear that. I actually didn't expect that from you. No. Yes, and the fact that you felt that is good, because it means that you have a connection to the earth. Again, it's been one of these things that's been our society has.
Well, Matt, I don't really fit in any mold.
We kind of perpetuated this idea that if anyone is a nature boy or anyone cares about nature, they get kind of made fun of and all these things. But reality is, we're a being that lives on planet Earth, and if we aren't connected and tuned to nature, then we're sick. Mm-hmm. We're a sick being. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it. Mm. How could you be a being who's part of the earth that needs sunshine and walks on this beautiful planet if you spend your time inside?
In the conventional scriptures, I think there's a scripture says something in order that ye shall be as trees planted by the rivers of water, which to me is an eloquent statement to say you're going to be this fantastic entity, this living thing, and you're going to be like this tree, So I think we all want to be like trees. All right, we got a couple more questions before we get to our 9 o'clock break. Let's get these out real quick. This is from King's Daughter out of the live chat. Do you study, and I think you've already answered, did you study the book of Enoch? It sounds like you did.
Yeah.
All right.
Those writings, again, if you want to see all the things that predated the Bible and all these virgins that came along, if you want to see where religion really came from and the wonders of what it really was trying to say about how incredible we are and about all these things that happen in history, read the book of Enoch, read the Nag Hammadi scriptures, all these things that were found during, these conflicted times in history like World War II when everybody ignored them.
Well, man, I'll give you a little bit more. I'm not ashamed. The power company came to my property one day and said they're going to have to cut 3 of my prize trees that I personally planted and watched them grow. Yes, 15 years I watched them grow. I nurtured them.
Like little kids, right? Little children.
And they were going to come down. I knew it was inevitable. Can't fight the power company. So I'm just telling you, I went out there and I told that tree I was sorry for what was coming.
That's good. That's nice of you to do that.
Thank you. And then I took the chips and I laid the chips to rest and to reuse them so that new growth may come from that debt there. All right, one more question here. This is from Mandy Thompson. And again, we got a bunch of other questions coming in for you too. We'll get to the second hour. It says, Matt, do you have a religion or you just consider yourself spiritual?
You'll see that in the future we're gonna redefine what we consider when people have religion. I would call myself just a kind of a spiritual person of the universe, where I believe very strongly in kind of developing an awareness of where you belong and where you fit in the whole cosmic aspect of things. And so what would you call that? I guess you would just call it a spiritual universal being of religion. I don't know what you would label that.
Growing up, did you go to church?
I did. I was put through a lot of Sunday schools for many, many years, and it just didn't make any sense to me. All these things they kept saying about how this story went, I would have no connection to it because it just seemed like there was something wrong with all these teachings, and I actually ended up, you could call me, I guess, an atheist for a few years but I never really was because I was always connected to nature and the earth. Mm-hmm. But then I had to kind of redevelop and find my spiritual side after that. Okay, Matt, if you really love plants, I want you to go find a thorn bush and give it a big old hug. No, it's not like that. I mean, I appreciate the beauty of the world around us, though. Oh, okay. All right. Hey, so you've got a book, Illusion of Us, The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness. Matt, where can people get that? And do you have a website or anything, or get it from Amazon or what? Sure. Please go on Amazon and find the latest copy on there. I have a YouTube page, Matthew LaCroix, LaCroix, where I create a lot of movies. I really enjoy creating little mini movies and things like that where I can explain the truth from another angle and various things. And also I have a Facebook page, The Illusion of Us, where I share a lot of new evidence and various things like that. Very, very good. All right, we're going to take you out of the picture. Turn your volume down this time because we actually have to play a sound on your channel. So just turn that down. We'll be back with you in about 5 minutes, Matt. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. Tonight on our Newsmaker line on Skype is Matt LaCroix. If you missed any of the first hour, to begin to replay and remain player, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Let's go back to our Skype channel and welcome back Matt LaCroix. Matt, welcome back. Thanks. All right, man, it was a great, interesting first hour there. We were talking about the illusion that we are sort of living in, and some people might even call that a matrix. And how do you how would a person dice out the fact that they have been so brainwashed that they can't even make a intelligent decision that's not based on somebody else's dictates? Well, when I was, again, putting all these pieces together, I realized that it was almost a perfect system. It was so well designed and so clever that it simply wasn't like a couple elite men who just wanted power. This was something so well done that that's why this 90% of people everywhere have no idea of any of it, because they go through an entire lifetime of very meticulously from school, which is like almost like boot camp. Where think about it in school, right? If someone goes through just up through high school, if they're different at all from the kids around them, if they're have a big imagination and they're thinking about the stars and all these things, they're going to be ridiculed in school and cast out, and they're not going to have any friends. They're not going to feel like they have any self-worth. So one of the things I talk about in the suppression chapter is how we have this entire segment of society who has the very ones who are the intelligent outside thinkers who want to bring all this to the table are the very ones who are cast out and thrown into the gutter. And that's why society has just generation after generation kind of evolved to be what it is now, because it's built on so much misinformation and conditioning. It's called social conditioning for thousands of years. That's how far back it's gone, that people have no idea that it's anything different. They have no idea it could be anything different.
All right, here's just a quick, let's do a rapid fire here real quick. Just yes, no answers. Okay. Is the earth flat?
Is there a what?
Is the earth flat?
No, the earth is not flat.
Yes or no? Yes or no? We got a bunch of them. Here we go. Is the earth hollow?
Yes, there are massive caverns under the earth. The entire thing's not hollow, but there are massive underground openings.
Is the moon in front of the clouds or behind the clouds?
It's well outside the Earth's atmosphere.
Okay. Is it an alien satellite?
The moon is an artificial piece of rock. You call it a satellite that has been put there on purpose, yes.
Do aliens have satellites in Earth orbit?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're just being watched from all over the place. That's the kind of irony in it.
Did man come from a primordial soup?
I mean, everything. No, that's a very no. I just give it no. There's so much more complexity to it than that.
If aliens were to vote, would they tend to vote Democrat or Republican?
They would vote neither. They would vote for a system that doesn't have divides. It would be a system that's logical based on objective thinking.
Is Kim Jong-il going to fire a nuke at South Korea?
All that stuff is just a smoke show to keep people preoccupied with not looking any other direction.
Have you ever prayed to Jesus?
No, I sometimes ask for assistance from the creator of all, but Jesus is not that.
Okay. All right. Getting back to our questions, let's go back to now you can give a little more lengthy answers, but not too lengthy because there's a bunch of questions in here for you, Matt. So the film, this is Tom Jones in the UK. So the film, The Matrix, does that ring a parallel to what you're saying?
Oh, that's one of the really neat aspects of this. When you start uncovering the truth and putting more of it together, you see all these movies that exist that have all kinds of truth. And so when you let's say you rewatch it again after years ago, but now you have a bunch of different perspectives, a way to look at the world differently. And then you watch a movie like The Matrix and you just completely blow your mind because there is so much truth in that movie that if someone is truly being objective enough and they haven't put it all together, they should sit back and have that movie. It should blow their mind because it describes what we'll be talking about, this great illusion where everyone has been put into a manufactured reality where reality is real, but the way they perceive it is not real.
All right. Did you ever get sick physically when trying to reach higher states of consciousness?
No, I never get sick physically, but it can take a lot of energy from you. You can feel pretty drained after.
All right. Do you see, these are still questions from the live chat. Do you see artificial intelligence in the future becoming part of our consciousness? And do you think it will be a good thing?
I think artificial intelligence is inevitable for certain areas, but in terms of merging with human beings, I see it's very, very dangerous and is a very negative thing.
How do you find evidence that the truth is true? When you find the truth, what evidence do you measure it against to make sure it is the truth?
You must start by being objective and learning the things that are a certain way, understanding the things around you. And the only way to do that is to simply fill yourself with as much knowledge as possible. And the first thing to do that with, people say, well, how do you fill yourself with knowledge if it's all true knowledge? Fill yourself with knowledge of everything around you. learn the world, learn mountain ranges, learn countries, learn different groups of people, then learn about the stars and the planets around us. And then that's how you start filling yourself with things, and start understanding. But again, you're going to get tripped up, because the further you go, the more you're going to run into areas that have been manipulated. Mm-hmm. So then at that point, like I said, you have to become like Sherlock Holmes, where you have to follow kind of that intuition inside, where you objectively weigh things and you look at evidence. Mm-hmm. And really, when people start down that path, they call it the rabbit hole, like in the Matrix. Once you start on truth and you start laying foundations down, you know what's true. It's because it starts to all fall into place. Mm-hmm. And you see that it's all connected to this great sequence of things that have happened. And that's why you often, like me, you feel anxiety and pressure to want to then tell others, because it's a very big thing to hold.
Hey man, if you were with a friend and you were giving these great deep dissertations and you're going on for, say, half an hour, and then you look for a response and your friend says, okay, hey, you want to go get a Big Mac at McDonald's? Would that depress you?
That happens all the time. That's welcome to my life. You begin to have to only tell certain people who are ready for that kind of information. You run up against so many different people who have a different level of consciousness. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing we need to separate here. Mm-hmm. Remember, we talked about how there's different kinds of consciousness out there, like in plants. Well, people have their own level of consciousness as well. Mm-hmm. And the spectrum is pretty enormous.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what was the last random act of kindness you did to a stranger?
Oh, well, my friend was just moving in today, so I just helped him move in his house.
But that's your friend. About a stranger.
Yeah, today. What'd you say?
What about a stranger?
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's not a stranger. Oh yeah, it was funny. I was bringing some books into a bookstore. They were newer versions, and they gave me back some of the older ones, because I've added a lot of content over the last year. And so I had a couple of these books that were a little bit older, and I saw a homeless man. And most people would think that that's a waste, but I thought I wouldn't prejudge him, and I said I didn't have any money, so I thought I'd give him some wisdom instead.
Okay. Did you tell him about the illusion of human consciousness as a free gift?
I actually did have a little change, so I gave him my change and I gave him the book, and I told him, always keep an open mind, and please, I promise me you'll read this. And he was like, yeah, I guess, and he kind of just walked off. Hey, I'll pass judgment. I hope maybe he doesn't burn it for warmth or something.
Well, well, there you go, man. Some people say, "Hey, man, how about something to eat?" And you hand him a book. I'm not sure. But here's a question from Tom Jones in the UK. He says, and we're talking about the sort of the dumbing down of society, and that really, it just seems to be what's going on out there. I did kind of a ranty points about what's going on in Berkeley. Just people don't want to hear anything other than somebody talking what they already believe. They can't stand any version of knowledge beyond their own. But Tom wants to know, is alcohol a drug of choice created by these old dried crackers, or whoever it is that's created this matrix that we're in? Is alcohol put in there to keep us sort of dumbed down and unmotivated? And along those lines, wouldn't marijuana fit that as well?
Nice question, Tom. Alcohol is a very dangerous drug that people don't realize, that even beyond the extremely dangerous health effects that it has over time, what it really does that's so disruptive is it completely blocks off consciousness, which is very important, because not all substances do that. We have to make that clear. Alcohol is part of what's called a suppressant, because it suppresses all these important things within us, and it also increases aggression and all these various things. If I was a very intelligent being and I didn't want humanity to reach a certain path, alcohol would be one of the most perfect things to ever give them, because it would cause them to never reach a higher state, and all they would do is fight each other. It's perfect. It's a perfect thing to do. Whereas let's look at the war on drugs, and all these Schedule I things besides heroin are almost all psychedelics, which means they expand the mind, and those are all the things that are made the most illegal. So we have to actually step back and think that maybe what we've been told is a medicine versus a drug, or versus poison, or versus other things, are not exactly right.
when I see somebody who's obviously high or been doing a lot of marijuana, they always seem to walk around with their mouths just sort of open, just kind of like that, and that was very, very low motivation. Kind of reminds me of fluoride in World War II. I understand that the Nazis, the Germans put fluoride in the water for the prisoners because that would cause them to be less resistant or to their situation, less reticent to try to escape. And so it kind of reminds me of that. All right, here's a question from King's Daughter. It says, how do you think technology is dumbing down brainwashing people? And I don't know, I'm sure you've seen this yourself. I've talked to people, well, I guess you could say talking to them, and so you're trying to talk to them and they're going, yeah. They're just going like this. Yeah. And they're not even hearing you, because they're making that last text. They're doing, looking at that last nude, whatever they got going. And so it's like, we can't even communicate anymore.
Technology is a double-edged sword. It can be used for the greatest of good. I mean, if you're on a set path of finding truth and you know who to look for and searching around, you can find everything you could ever imagine online or whatever it is, these various outlets. And we never had that existed, where we become a global network of minds. At the same time, the technology has caused this massive segment of society who's not looking for answers to just be even further in that illusion, even further in that fake reality of where, like you said, they're walking around their phones. They're not even like in the world anymore. They're not even conscious of the things around them. They're simply just, maybe texting or keeping track of talking to someone until they can see that person next or whatever it is. They don't even care about anything around them. And so what do you see? Well, you see a lot of people doing a lot less reading. You see people doing a lot less spending time outside. So technology can be an extremely beneficial thing for those
a lot less tree hugging.
Well, it can be very motivating for people who have that motivation.
They be hugging their phones, man. I'm just saying, when the cataclysmic events happen, whatever it's going to be, millions of young people are going to get on their phones and they're going to say, "Okay, Google, where can I get food? Make it." They think it's going to magically appear. They don't understand something. Their phone ain't going to work. Just recently, I think Russia just said that they could drop a EMP pulse weapon on the U.S. fleet and just totally disable it. So people need to know how to live without a phone, and because it's not going to be there if things go wrong.
Well, I certainly encourage everyone to learn how to grow food and how things work in the world and how things work in your car and in your house and all these things. We have to learn and objectively understand these things, because like you said, we can't just look at a phone and hope that something's going to magically resolve itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I would tell you technology is actually reversing course. I don't even think kids are learning how to spell now. They're teaching them how to type it in a keypad. So I don't know. Here's a question. Do you think, do you see consciousness of all of us? Are they all linked together? Everyone's conscious.
There's this concept called a collective consciousness, a global collective consciousness. And what that means is what reality is being held by the majority of the people on Earth will then kind of merge into that's what reality is. So when we talk about how all these things have been hidden and why nobody discovers them, it's because it's all been hidden behind this kind of mask of people that don't even know they're supposed to be looking for something. It's like, how do you know that something's not the way it is if you don't know it's not the way it is?
Right.
So nobody looks, and nobody even considers it, and so that's how it's so easily perpetuated.
Well, that's what Einstein said about dimensions. It's the four dimensions, height, width, depth, whatever the other one is. So how do you know there's the fifth one? You wouldn't know because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. That's right.
Interesting.
So all we have to do is, I don't blame people. I'm like the only one that doesn't say that, but I don't blame people, because if you were an advanced group of people who had knowledge beyond what you can imagine, and you had all these ants, like civilizations that were like ants almost in perception wise, Is it really fair for you to be just because you can take advantage of them that you do, and then you call the people stupid for not rejecting that message? It's like we've been led this way like sheep, led this direction of what's true by the victors of history and what we've been given, and people don't know that they shouldn't be going that direction. And if they do know that, they are not going to.
Ancient
because no one else is.
ancient history shows that at some point it appears that the human's life was much longer than it is today.
Yes.
So I saw a question come in. It says, is the fact that we've sort of been cut back to around 85 years, is that to reduce the population? Is that the effort to reduce the population?
Well, that's a very interesting question. It's not what you would think, actually. If you had a species like us, let's say we could live to 500 or 1,000 years, right? Would there be any motivation because of how long your lifespan is? Would there be any motivation for you to kind of change or do anything different? If you knew that there's no reason to because you have hundreds more years, why learn that now? I can learn that 100 years later, whatever. Now take us. The average human being on Earth dies at like 80 something, right? So we have an 80, let's call it 85. We have a population of people on Earth who they have only 85 years to do something and change something and go to some direction in their life. And if they don't, they have to kind of come back and do it all over again. And so what do? Well, you force evolution of consciousness in such a fast way in a species, and you stress it. And if you stress it in such a way, you won't believe how much can be accomplished in such a short amount of time.
All right. The question, this is from our moderator, Jade. She says, so if I'm following your logic, do you believe that we are gods?
Yes, I actually do. If you look, and that's what's so amazing about this. People, when they learn about truth, they're really scared they're going to find something out about that'll be worse than what we've been told now or something like that. And it's actually the complete opposite. We've been given the dry dirt floor view of how we're nothing, and we're just like ants, and there's nothing to be special about. When in reality, what you see is that what they're really protecting is that we are incredible beings.
Okay.
Because we've come from genetics that jump-started us to make us incredible beings.
Okay.
So yes, we are actually creator gods. Creator gods who don't really know it.
All right, Mr. Matt the God, would you like to go ahead and perform a God trick for us?
It's not like that. If the way we view gods is we're like the gods called us the children of men because it means we're like these beings who are struggling with our own identity, and that in the future we will have.
Wait a minute. What's the point, man? I mean,
us.
if you're a god, can't you? Can you change your green screen blue? I mean,
You're taking it too literally. We're like children with amnesia who have no skills. We're like learning how to even step out of the sandbox. The potential of what we have available to us in our future of our timeline for the brain capacity and all these different things. We literally have tapped only around 10% of our brain capacity so far in our species. And if you see where our DNA is going and how it's kind of changing and evolving with the double helix, look at our medical caduceus symbol. Everybody look it up. It's on every ambulance and every hospital. It shows a double serpent wound around together with wings at the top. And it means those serpents represent our double helix DNA with wings, which means it eventually changes and metamorphosizes into this great being. But we're not there yet. We're still that caterpillar that's crawling around in the weeds and hasn't realized it yet.
I realize there are doctors that embrace that logo you just said that will reach inside of a womb and rip a baby's brain out. So I don't know if that's the double twisted helix or double twisted neck of a little child. But let me ask you something. Curious had in the live chat asked this question related to something earlier. We were talking about different books. It says, do you believe that there's a spaceship under the Sphinx as the emerald tablets of Thoth states?
Thoth. Yeah. So basically, spaceship we shouldn't take that as a literal term. I believe underneath there are halls called the Halls of Amente underneath the Sphinx that also go underneath a lot of connect all the way to the Giza pyramids. These great, which they, by the way, they just found, if you look at some of the news from several months ago, using sonar and various technological tools, they found all these underground cavities. But that's all they told people in the news. They just said we found them, but we haven't heard anything else since, because the Halls of Amente, if you look at the emerald tablets, which were found in the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, Mexico, right, all the way across the world, they talk about this time we're entering right now, and they talk about how we're basically children of men who have lost all sight of knowing who we really are, and Thoth is this great being that came before us, who was trying to wake us up to the truth of any of this, and we've kind of forgotten all about it.
We were talking about doing away or hiding the truth. I remember, I believe was it the Library at Alexandria? Was that the one that the Romans burnt those books, took 6 months, and they heated their bathhouses with them? Can you imagine the information that was in those books?
Well, that's the whole point. That the Library of Alexandria represented one of these extremely important libraries, the reason why the Library of Alexandria was targeted, and by the way, it was targeted, was because it contained the knowledge of Atlantis. And today, if we look at famous philosophers that we put on the highest pedestal, even like Plato, who in the Timaeus and Critias talks about where Atlantis was, and he talks about when it was destroyed, we choose to ignore that because it's something that we think is a fairy tale and a myth, yet one of the greatest philosophers in history talks about that very thing.
A question came in from the live chat. Which civilization do you believe was closest to the truth, and why?
Well, I guess there's been if you want to go to the one that's been closest, you'd have to go to the oldest one, because over time they all became more and more corrupted. So I'd have to say the Sumerians. The Sumerians contained the most wisdom that was kind of uninterrupted. So if you want to know the truth, it's very easy. You simply just focus on Sumerian cuneiform tablets, because what it means is they're the first advanced culture we have. We can look at their writing system and we can tell that they're advanced, where they have astronomical skills, they had growing, harvesting based on cycles. All these different things tell us about how advanced these people were. And they were so advanced that the things they wrote about in these cuneiform tablets, and what that means is simply writing that can be put into stone, so it can be around forever. Because anything that's written on paper or animal skin degrades and disappears. So the only way to keep it around forever would be to put it in rock. So these cuneiform tablets basically give us a snapshot of what occurred in our past. So all these things I talk about, as crazy as they sound, all you have to do is go look at these writings from these advanced civilizations and see what they were talking about. Okay. See what they were saying about what our real story is, what happened in our past, how we were genetically jump-started, and all those things are in there.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to our rapid fire questions segment again. You ready?
Sure.
These would be yes or no here. And it's a do you believe? And so it's yes or no. Do you believe in fairies?
Not in the sense that we show them now. Just yes or no. Okay. I believe in like spirits like that. But
this is rapid fire. Yes, no. Bigfoot.
Yes, but not in the conventional terms. These actually been known as the Nephilim. Okay. But it's not. Okay. Again, a lot of things have been turned into a joke.
Leprechauns.
No, not in the conventional sense we've been shown. They're supposed to be a demonic being, though, or an enlightened being.
Gargoyles.
Yes, but not. But again, these terms in literal, none of these things really exist any longer, or some of them are symbolic representations of something else.
Okay, ghosts.
Yes, some spirits are definitely trapped here.
Orgon.
What is that?
Orgon. Have you ever heard of Orgon? Do you believe in Orgon?
I'm not sure what that is.
It's an anti-ghost device. Shadow people.
Yes, they would be called the Archons. Oh, there's been many names given for those beings that hide in the shadows, for sure.
Okay. All right, we're done with that. Now let's go to this question. Southern Boy from the live chat. Do you believe we live in a simulation?
No, but it's a manufactured reality that is like a simulation where because of the system of money, we're not able to function outside of this system that's been created because it's how everything is run through the system.
Okay,
Somebody wanted to be outside it.
Hold on, Matt. I guess we left a couple off here in the live chat. Caught me. Do you believe in trolls?
Yes, but again, I don't think these things really exist or even here any longer.
Black-eyed children.
Yes.
Hey, by the way, speaking of black-eyed, did you see that thing flying around in the news lately? This blonde woman that was arrested and she had black eyes. Did you see that?
No.
Oh, you got to look. It is creepy, man. What about gnomes? Do you believe in gnomes?
Yes, but I think a lot of these things are not what we would think them as now. Like we've been very much the way that they're portrayed has been so that we'll consider them a joke, and they're not really how we see them.
Okay, Matt, if you're on your bed, would you let your arm go on the side of the bed at night?
I have no fears. I'm not ruled by fear of anything.
There's nothing underneath there. No. Nothing in the closet?
Fear has no place ruling my life. Fear is an illusion. It's not real.
Okay. So unless something grabs you and drags you underneath the bed and you're never seen from again. All right. Hey, Kentucky Girl wants to know in the live chat. She says, Matt, how do you know all this stuff?
I don't claim to know anything. I'm just simply trying to pass the knowledge of what I've put together based on a lot of time reading and researching and doing all of these things. And I feel very gifted to have the ability to put a lot of them together in what I see as the most objectively evidence-driven way that I can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's a question from Tom Jones at the UK. Always got great questions. Is GMO food safe, or is it just another way of killing us off?
It's another way of sickening us. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, a lot of the sad truths of the things that occur make you not really want to trust your government, because there are so many ways that they're sickening us and dumbing down our consciousness. Chemtrails, GMOs, these are ways, and fluoride in water. These are all ways to sicken and dumb us down, kind of thin the herd of those who are too sick to kind of go on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, but it does seem like there's a lot of chemicals. They're trying to, through chemtrails, through the water, through the fluoride, through the, I'm surprised that the people are even left.
Well, that's the thing is, look at what we've overcome to get to this point, because look at what the Mayans said. They talked about how in 2012, everyone was made to believe that it would be the end of the world. But what they're really talking about was that the end of a time would occur. And what it represented is, El Capitan in Chichen Itza is a step temple pyramid, and it has a certain number of levels, and those levels represent when humanity would actually reach a certain level of consciousness. And according to them, we had reached the very top, which is universal consciousness. And that's what we're struggling with trying to reach in humanity. And all those things that we just talked about, mm-hmm. They're ways to keep us mm-hmm. from reaching that universal mm-hmm. consciousness state in very effective ways, actually.
When you see people just cover their bodies with tattoos and earrings and piercings and try to make themselves look, there's some people try to make themselves look like cats and demons and all kinds of creepy stuff. Are these people just gone? What happened to them?
I think everyone is just trying to cope in a very difficult reality that's not the way it should be.
Mm-hmm. All right. Here's a question for you. It says, Matt, in your search for truth, have you searched in the Bible?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I started with, as I said, I was in Sunday school for years, and so I got a lot of experience looking into what. Yeah, you said
I noticed how you put that. You go, I was put through that, almost as if you were being punished by doing that.
What's very interesting about it is I'm someone who's incredibly inquisitive. I always want to know more. That's what I do. But mm-hmm. the one time I haven't wanted to know more was during those Sunday school classes reading the Bible. Mm-hmm. It was like there was something in me that just was telling me it was complete. Like my intuition it's always been very strong, and I feel very thankful for that. Even as a kid, it was basically telling me that it was crap. And so I would never have the motivation to want to care to look into it. Mm-hmm. And that's possibly one of the reasons why I was able to discover truth as well as I have, because I wasn't really sidetracked by that.
Yeah, I note that when somebody says they have a God working in their life, that an exorcist will come along and get them out of there. All right, here's a question. It says, do you think that fractals play a large part in the world around us?
Yeah, everything is based on fractals of light. We are, again, it's like this illusion where we don't actually realize how amazing the real reality is all around us, where the physical world that we perceive is simply one aspect of what's really around us going on. And what it all comes down to are these different fractals of light and different vibrational frequencies, and they actually govern how everything's going to run. And so it's very interesting when you learn that human beings have a certain vibrational frequency that causes us to tune into consciousness, right? And you learn that like the Great Pyramids of Giza have been designed specifically to tune into that frequency. Mm-hmm. It can be even more interesting to find out that electronic devices that we're given, mm-hmm. like cell phones and TVs, right. They all emit the complete opposite type of vibrational frequency that comes out of it. So basically, if you're around all of these electronics that cover everything around us, you're being pulled down. Your vibration of your consciousness and you being the state where you can clearly think, mm-hmm. is being pulled down by all these things that are emitting all of these vibrational frequencies that we can't see. We can't see radio waves. We mm-hmm. can't see all these things that affect us, mm-hmm. because we only have perception for a small mm-hmm. number of things in this reality.
Mm-hmm. How much of the conventional Bible do you consider crap?
They've definitely taken like 50% of it and left just these fragments. I think it's probably less than half that even exists. That's of its kind of more pure form. Okay. It's interesting that they still leave little areas in the Bible where they mess up. There's one spot that I love to go back to. I think it's in Genesis. I don't remember exactly where it is, but they mentioned they mentioned the word gods plural with an S on the end instead of God by accident, and that's like the only time they actually mentioned that. Mm-hmm. And there's all these little other things that are strange, like they mentioned how there were giants in those days, mm-hmm. but people don't really they don't really pick up on that, because I think a lot of people have this notion that anything that occurred in the past.
Let's be fair here. How much of the Quran do you consider crap?
I think, again, all of these religions were based on like the Book of Enoch and the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and they were all diverted to kind of write their own purpose.
How much of the Nag Hammadi scriptures do you consider truthful?
As far as I can see, those writings are as far back as we can go and are representative of this time when truthful writing, when truth existed. See, the very fabric of truth itself has been eroded so much that it only exists in these small pockets left, which had been very well guarded and hidden. Like you mentioned, mm-hmm. the Library of Alexandria contains so much truth that it could have changed the very timeline of how our species had gone. Mm-hmm. Think about all of that knowledge that was burned and lost. That's all gone forever, and that's kind of how we have amnesia of a lot of the history of what's happened. If you burn the truth, mm-hmm. and there's no more truth to be read, how is anyone going to ever know what happened?
And the Nag Hammadi scriptures, how many lives have changed for the better because that book exists?
Well, certainly a lot now. People are flooding to the Book of Enoch and the Nag Hammadi scriptures because they want to know what the truth of religion was supposed to be. They want to know who we really are. They want to know what happened in our story. And all of a sudden, these writings don't become just religious babble. They become historical documents.
Doesn't much of what's in the Book of Enoch support basic biblical tenets?
No, it has things like
them?
How they lived like it talks about how they lived to ages that were far beyond what we are now, and they talked about how beings from the stars came down. They talk about these archonic forces that have been brought up from lower dimensions that have actually preyed upon humanity and have actually led us towards a certain path. Mm-hmm. The truth, this is what I like to tell people. The truth of history is more incredible than even science fiction. And perhaps that's the whole reason why, like we talked about movies before having truth. Right. That's the whole reason why all of this science fiction, not that it all contains all truth, but it's all like just kind of prepping us for an expanded awareness of all that's possible out there. We see things like Star Trek when they're traveling on the stars. While all of that's not truth, it gives us the idea that there are beings that could literally travel around and visit other places.
Wow, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of questions. I'll tell you what, Matt, and we'll go through these questions here and try, if you can, keep your answers just a little shorter, because people,
sorry,
well, that's okay. People really appreciate their questions being asked, and so that is part of the program. What do you know about any coming cataclysmic events? There's always people in the audience. We want to know about doomgasms, man.
Okay, so why did this is a very, I got to expand on this one a little bit, guys. I apologize, but this is very important. Why did all of this get lost? What happened? Well, there have been cataclysms in our past that have been responsible for us losing all of this. And then if you were to have a cataclysm wipe all of this off the planet, wouldn't that be a perfect opportunity for those who are jealous and maybe don't want our expanded consciousness? That would be the perfect time to kind of create a false illusion of reality, wouldn't it? Because there would be no one really left to kind of defend it. So 12,500 years ago, we had the Ice Age here, where ocean levels were 400 feet lower than they are today. And we can find ancient civilizations and cities all across, especially Eastern Asia, off like Japan, where they're underwater by hundreds and hundreds of feet of seawater.
Yeah, I'm actually showing your pictures that you sent me, and one of them is the underwater thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so if you look at those structures, you can see that they're very sharp structures that have had no erosion and no water damage or anything. They're structures that have been man-made who have been lost to the oceans because during the Ice Age, when all of that water was locked up in ice, when these cataclysms occurred, which go look at our history with our ice core samples and all of us stuff, you can see that the last Ice Age ended around 12,000 years ago, which is the exact same date that we see mirrored all over the world with the loss of these advanced civilizations. We had catastrophic events occur on Earth that were so dramatic that almost most human beings on Earth were wiped out. And that's how nobody was left to tell the story. And so in Turkey, there's an underground city called Derinkuyu. I really encourage people to look this stuff up. And they could fit to this day underground, right? If you were to dig through rock and create an underground city, they can fit to this day more than 20,000 people underground. But what's even more interesting is that at these doorways where they come in, instead of just being like an open door where people could walk in and out, they had these massive round stones that were so big that they would have to roll them over the doorway to protect any kind of an event that occurred. And at the same time, the Hopi Indians all the way across the world, their legend from the highest elders they have are that they were led into these caves 12,000 years ago by these beings to survive. And what you learn, and then you look in the Bible with the story of Noah that we think is all fake, these waters that flooded all of the earth. And it's actually very real, but the Noah story has been turned into a fairy tale joke because of the way that they portrayed it. So imagine a cataclysm occurring on this earth and wiping out everything we remember that occurred in the past. And so all of these megalithic structures, like the pyramids of Giza and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, they can all be dated to this 12,500 time period before these cataclysms wiped them out. So having said that, that's what occurred in our past.
Okay. Well,
the very same thing that caused those events to occur is passing through right now. And what that is there is a planet that's part of our solar system that has been the knowledge has been suppressed. It's been called Planet X. And all these probes have been sent out throughout history. Mm-hmm. There's even that SpaceX shuttle that was just blown up that we saw, right? That's right, I said blown up. Mm-hmm. But watch the video from that very slowly.
Yeah.
It's called SpaceX because it was literally going to find Planet X. And so there's this planet that exists with this massive elliptical orbit. And that these cuneiform writings we talked about from our earliest civilizations, they talk about how these cataclysms occurred. And Noah's real name, which is the same name as one of these cuneiform tablets, was Atrahasis.
Oh, really?
So one of these cuneiform tablets that I want everyone to look at is called the Epic Atrahasis. And Atrahasis was the real name of Noah. And you learn that he was this being who had been told against the guidance of the gods about this great flood coming. And that was this cataclysm that occurred in our past. Now, right now we're going through situations where volcanoes are erupting all over the planet. We're seeing all kinds of changes occurring because right now we're entering the same kind of thing that occurred before, but nowhere near as serious. What it represents is Planet X, depending on where it passes between our Earth and the sun, can have either catastrophe on our planet or it can have just subtle impacts. And everyone is heading to the hills right now. There's so much fear about Planet X causing all this destruction on the Earth. And everything that I can see has
Are you
shown
running to the hill? Are you running to the hills?
No, because everything that I've been shown is that we've actually been planned to reach this time for thousands of years. And that's what the Mayans knew about the calendars. And we're not reaching this time just to be wiped out. That's why they knew that this pass now they knew where it would fall and that it wouldn't cause cataclysms. And I think right now you're seeing so much fear mongering behind it because fear has been the ultimate tool to hold back humanity. Fear is the ultimate tool to keep people in their lowest chakra, their red chakra.
The red chakra. Hey man, so there's a lot of fear out there, fear mongering on whether or not this crazy kook, Fat Boy Little Dong or whatever his name is in North Korea going to fire the nuke. And I think I asked a previous guest this question. Isn't there a case in our history where aliens disabled some nukes before? And is it likely that they'll come down and disable that Fat Boy's nukes?
I think everything we're seeing with all of these smoke screens of all these military powers fighting, as much as people don't like to hear it, I think it's all just a complete smoke screen to distract us. All of it is. What do you hear? North Korea, they're going to pretend to say something bad and then we retaliate and say something bad, but nothing ever happens because that's all it is. It's just slander and us to keep us distracted from all of these other things that are really occurring. All of these other things that are very important, like Planet X and all these things that have happened where,
So is Planet X going to smash into our planet?
No, there's never been smashing. There's things like comets and asteroid debris that can crash into Earth, and there's things like pole shifts that can occur. But those are from dangerous passes. This pass, from everything that I've seen, is not going to be one of those passes.
What about the damn Anunnaki? Are they coming back here?
Well, so there's been a lot of these terms like Anunnaki. People hear that because there's been a lot of attention put to kind of throw it under the bus. All the Anunnaki simply means is the Sumerians that we were talking about, the earliest civilization, the gods that they called their gods, the Anunnaki, which all it meant was those who from heaven, the heavens came to earth. And so when you think about that, it really doesn't mean much at all. It just means gods. And that's a very broad term to think about. But the reality is there are many, many gods and beings who have visited Earth all throughout time. And we are, instead of being alone and thinking we're alone in the vast cosmos, we're actually quarantined off because of how barbaric we are.
Would you advise against taking ayahuasca?
No, I am fully supportive of all psychedelics as long as they're taking responsibility and people realize what they truly can do.
Huh? I thought we were talking earlier in the first hour that it makes people stupid.
Oh, I never mentioned anything about ayahuasca. You said alcohol.
Well,
alcohol is a suppression. Ayahuasca is simply a brew that's composed of DMT.
Yeah, but isn't that the drug that when you see giant spiders crawling up a wall? I'm not know how much enlightening.
There's been so much misinformation. One of the things that I've had to uncover with truth is that so many things in history have been inverted to their opposite meanings. So psychedelics, things that expand your mind like that, have been demonized and propagandized for more than 70 years so that people, the things that actually can expand us are the very things that we've been thought are make you stupid or all these misconceptions. Meanwhile, we're perpetuating alcohol, which kills thousands and thousands of people a year.
Matt, are you on psychedelic drugs right now?
No, I'm not.
Would you like to be?
But I'm an objective person who looks at everything the way it really should be, and I don't ever have a stigma towards something if it shouldn't have that stigma.
Okay. All right. A few more questions here. Do you believe in past lives? Past lives?
Absolutely. That's been another huge thing that's been ridiculed and hidden from us is if we had this mortality that's only 90 years or 100 years. Right now it's only 80 something, right? If we have that, then we're forced to do all this in such a short amount of time. And if you don't accomplish certain, call them expanded things where you can learn valuable lessons, you have to come back over and over again. Incarnation is very real. And the things that you were able to remember, that's why some people, they have extremely good at sports, like athletics, or they're very good at certain things and they don't know why. Mm-hmm. These are things that have been passed down from that they still have. Mm-hmm. And so you can thank some of these past sacrifices you've done. Mm-hmm. And I believe the whole past lives and incarnation thing.
Well, man, I've met people who took psychotropic drugs before, and their brain never came back.
Well, I mean, I don't know who those people are, but
they took too much.
The term "not coming back" to what? I mean, people are already in a place where they think
sanity.
Not real.
Sanity. Okay.
So what's sane? I mean, most people, in my opinion, with the way that things have gone, are almost what we consider insane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So are you okay with marijuana then?
I'm okay with all psychedelics for those who take them responsibly and don't abuse them.
Mm-hmm. If you had children and the bus driver was high on ayahuasca, would you be okay with that?
Again, that's abuse. Why is somebody high when they're with kids and
because they want to get high? Because somebody who gets high wants to get high all the time. I'm just saying.
That's people have to learn moderation in their life. Just because someone's selfish and they can't hold themselves, have no way to hold back on something, doesn't mean someone else should be punished just because they can't. They're not.
If a person's will is lowered, say by a psychotropic drug, would that make them more susceptible to demon possession?
No, absolutely not. If anything,
that would not open a gate.
People with the ability to expand their minds are able to actually break free and finally wake up for the first time.
Uh-huh. And if somebody so let's just say they have a regular job, and then all of a sudden they just take you. Just say you have a study course in opening your consciousness through the use of psychotropic drugs, and they just took it. The next day, how would their day be different? Would they go to work? Or would they say, "Hey, I'm a free being now. I know truth. I don't got to work." What would they do the next day?
The truth can be disrupted for people who no longer have the same interest in spending all their time on something that drains all their energy. But I think that most people have to uncover the truth and awaken slowly. It doesn't happen just overnight. It's not something where they just wake up and they lose all motivation, everything. It has to be a slow process because the mind to reformat reality takes incredible amounts of energy and time. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to do.
Are there energy parasites out there, Matt?
Absolutely. That's the hardest thing for people to conceptualize and understand is that if we are these antennas and we're these mortal beings in this third dimension, and we're tuning into these antennas, and all we can base ourselves on the decisions we make are like the voices in our head or the things we decide on. Well, these parasitic beings, which are talked about in many cuneiform tablets and many places where they're referencing in writings where they talk about how they can almost be parasites to our mind and force us to do wicked and terrible things. Hitler actually may have been a great example. There are writings. There are many things where they talk about how Hitler spoke openly about how he was contacted by these strange voices in his head who told him to do certain things, and so is that person insane? That person has allowed their consciousness to be taken over by something else, and they're no longer in control of themselves. That's very much how you can see why the world has gone the way it has. Mm-hmm. Certain people in high-ranking positions are literally not even really themselves anymore. Mm.
All right, last question. Let's go with this one. It says, have you seen anything that you would call dimensional communication?
Directly to me, or
have you communicated on the other side? I'm just going to that may not be the reference, but that's what I want to know.
It is amazing when sometimes I'll have discussions with myself, almost like people think that's crazy, but when you sometimes if you're just walking, you have a discussion, you're trying to figure something out. It's the best way if you actually talk out loud. And sometimes when I'm trying to figure something out, if I get to a certain place where all of a sudden I figure it out, and I'm like, oh my God, that's it. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden you'll have this powerful feeling that comes over you, and it's like you're being contacted from beyond to kind of give you recognition for you figuring it out. So yeah, that to me is like you're being monitored and kind of given certain energy motivations if you are kind of someone who's walking a certain path here.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we've got right there at the end of the broadcast. Matt, what did you like to say anything about your book, how to get it, anything like that? You go right ahead. Facebook page, whatever.
I would appreciate anyone who, if they want a stepping stone guide, there's so much to try to figure out, right? There's so much misinformation and there's so much out there that it's hard to figure out what's real. Please find the illusion of us and see that I created it as a stepping stone guide so that you can take these pieces and then go off and research them yourselves and have something to follow to not be totally lost. And as always, be objective. And please check my channel out at Matthew LaCroix, where I create a lot of not just I have my book, but I have movies where I try to show pictures and video and I try to explain all this stuff so I can have people visualize it as well.
Okay. Well, Matt LaCroix, I appreciate you coming on the Edge television broadcast. How do you like it?
I am really enjoying myself. Thank you for having me on.
All right.